Hey everyone, it's Adam and Kathy, the Vegan Preppers, and we are going to show you how to do Mylar bag food storage. Do-do-do, do-do-do, vegan prepper. Do-do-do, do-do-do, vegan prepper. All right, so we're going to be discussing how to put up food for long-term storage. And when you want to put up food for long-term storage, and I'm talking like 10, maybe even 20 years, you are combating a lot of things that are trying to make your food go bad. So just like a very short list would be light, oxygen, moisture, little critters like bugs and rodents. And so doing a system where you're using Mylar bags in conjunction with oxygen absorbers and then putting it into something like a bucket or a tote or something, that ends up giving you a really well-rounded defense against a lot of those issues. If you want extremely in-depth, wonderful information, I could not recommend this book enough. It is Food Storage for Self-Sufficiency and Survival by Angela Paskett. I originally heard about this from Canadian Prepper, and I really do love this book. It's an excellent, excellent read. So definitely go get yourself this if you want a lot of other really in-depth information. But for now, we are going to get into some good information and then some logistical stuff. So I think nobody talks about the logistics. It's not always the easiest thing to put this together.
All right, so I'm just gonna take a quick minute and talk about Mylar bags. Mylar is basically just a type of fancy plastic, but it is airtight. It's an oxygen barrier. So some plastics are not oxygen barrier, but Mylar is an oxygen barrier. And that's important when you are trying to keep oxygen out of your bag. So you want to get a Mylar bag from a reputable source. You can get Mylar bags on Amazon that you will regret getting. We get ours from Azure Standard, and ideally you get some that are at least 4 mil thick. Now the mil measurement, mil is not an abbreviation for millimeter. It's not an abbreviation for anything else. That's just the term of measurement, MIL, and 1 mil is 1/1000th of an inch, so 0.001 of an inch. So our bags from Azure Standard are 5.25 mil, which is just over 5/1000ths of an inch. So ideally you get at least 4 mil to make sure your bag's going to be strong enough. A lot of the ones you find from less reputable resources are 2 mil, and that's not going to be thick enough. So you have to be concerned about the bag breaking just from the stuff you put in it or being punctured by something else. And also, the thicker the bag, the less light they can get through it, and the bag is protecting from light as well as from oxygen. So get bags from a reputable source you can trust.
Okay, so for our oxygen absorbers today, we are using a combination of a 300cc size and a 100cc size. And the amount that you use per bag depends upon the size of the bag and the density of the food that goes into the bag. So I am using a chart, which is on a website, I'm not sure what it is, but I'm linking it down below, and I'll put it right here on the screen, that tells you how many oxygen absorbers you need to use per size of bag and density of food, and then it goes into all of those examples as well. And so you get the right combination, and then that's what you do for your oxygen absorbers in your Mylar bag. But one more thing I do want to talk about is when you first get your oxygen absorbers, it comes with this cute little pink eye that lets you know that all the oxygen absorbers are still good. And so I remember being like, well, that doesn't help me at all. I don't know what color it's supposed to be. Like, it shows up pink, like with no indication as to whether or not that's the color it's supposed to be. So I did save this out of one of the bags that I used before, so you can see the difference. When they're still good, the eye is pink, and when they are no longer good and it's all used up, the eye goes purple, and that is how you know whether or not your oxygen absorbers are still good. So now you can see the color it turns when it's bad. It would be super helpful to have immediately. And so, yes, also oxygen absorbers are not for use with desiccants. So desiccants are things that remove moisture from the bag. So some people would think, oh, well, I'll put a desiccant and an oxygen absorber in at the same time. But the action of the oxygen absorber does depend at least a little bit on moisture in the air, because it is the oxidization of iron particles, which requires some moisture. So if you put a desiccant pack in the bag, the oxygen absorber isn't going to work. So it's really important not to mix the two together.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what to put your Mylar bags in once they're all sealed up. So this itself is protecting it from moisture, oxygen, and light for the most part. But things can still poke holes in these bags. And also they don't really stand up very well on their own. So they're a little bit of a hassle for long-term storage. So a couple of options that we use are buckets. We got these awesome square buckets from a friend of ours, food safe old mayonnaise buckets. And also just big totes. You can see that in the camera. And we just got these at big box store. These will hold a lot more. One of the problems with holding a lot more is these get very heavy very fast. These will hold about 100 pounds of stuff, depending on what it is. Rice and beans, it'll hold about 100 pounds. So that can get a bit cumbersome. But it helps with the storage, helps keep everything organized. It also protects from those punctures and also from rodents. We thankfully haven't had any problems with rodents at this point, but as a preventative, we like to have our Mylar bags inside of something that is not easily chewed through. So we can just protect all of our food from as many different things as possible simply by putting it in something that's a lot harder to puncture. And another thing, as far as having stuff in buckets, that makes it really nice for transporting. If we were to need to leave our house for any reason for a extended period of time, we could just grab as many of these buckets as we can carry and put them in the truck, and they're all ready to go, easy to carry. We don't have to worry about them getting shuffled around or damaged, and it just makes it really easy to carry. And there's also added protection from the elements, flood, a pipe burst in your house. These are waterproof, but it just is a great thing to have a little bit of extra protection for your most valuable resource. So you go to all this trouble of buying this and storing it, just one more step to make sure that it's safe from any of those things.
All right, so now that you have all of the equipment straight for actually doing your storing, what on earth can you store like this? And so it's good to think of mostly dry goods that are very low in fat. So for instance, white rice has a shelf life of anywhere from 20 to 30 years, possibly longer, whereas brown rice, because it still has the hull and that little bit of fat on it, only has a shelf life of about 6 months. So it's really important when you're trying to plan out your food storage, especially if you're planning on putting something up, set it and forget it, super long-term storage, security for your family. Stick with the stuff that stores for a very long time. We have a video already covering a lot of kind of forever, super long-term storage foods, which I will link down below. But also, I just had to say, just get this book, just get it, and then you don't even have to watch my videos anymore. But of course, you still can't. But yeah, this book has a great thing. Actually, the page that is bookmarked is the shelf life of foods page. And so, like I said, low-fat things, but one really surprising exception, which I think is extremely important to mention, especially for vegans, is flaxseed. Whole flaxseed apparently has a 20-year shelf life if it's stored properly like that. So it's like random things will have a longer shelf life than you expect. So definitely check out our video, get that book, you'll be set. And now the final thing to consider is, are we storing small quantities or large quantities in our storage? And so the answer is yes. It kind of depends upon what your goal is. Now, you can take a 5-gallon bucket and put a 5-gallon Mylar bag in there and just dump an entire bag, like a 25-pound bag of wheat berries, for instance, and then get that thing set up, set it and forget it again for like 20 or 30 years. Once it's oxygen absorber, everything put away, you have like one bucket of one thing in a giant bag, which can be good because it's easy to store that way. So it makes your storage, like your work on the front end, is a lot simpler. And especially if you're really pressed for time, that might be a way that you'd like to go. Do that with beans, do that with rice, whatever works for you, especially in your space. Go for it, whatever works. However, it makes it sort of like on the back end, when you're actually going to be using the food, it makes it a little bit more troublesome. Now, we do definitely have some buckets like that set up for really long-term storage. But a lot of our storage is more in smaller quantities. As you have seen, we have like 1-gallon bags. And so when you do smaller amounts of storage, it makes it a little easier when you're getting into your food to deal with. Also, if you're getting into that food, like if you forgot to order your bulk thing and oh shoot, we're out of black beans, oh, I gotta get into the Mylar bags of black beans, you're only opening one small bag rather than one large bag. So things potentially can stay good for longer in the smaller bags. And then also, depending on, you also have to think about how you want to store it. So you can take the smaller bags and store a quantity of all the same food in all the same place, and that makes it easier for your storage system, for organizing it, for knowing what is where. This is the tote that is full of all the little bags of black beans. This is the tote that's full of all the little bags of popcorn. This, you know, like things like that. But it's also something that we want to do ourselves. We haven't done yet. Something that I read about in an article on the Azure Standard website, something that they call a variety bucket, where you can take yourself like a little bucket, whatever bucket you have, and fill it with much smaller bags of more things. So that, say you have smaller bags of rice, smaller bags of beans, smaller bags of, you know, you've got your salt and your flavoring, you've got everything in it that you would want, so that you can pull out one bucket in a situation, or like Adam was discussing earlier, if you have to leave your house for some reason, you got to evacuate something, you can grab a whole bunch of variety buckets that are already full of all kinds of things that are ready for you in that kind of situation. Now, that might not be the best thing for a lot of long-term storage. It'll take up a lot of space, and that's not the handiest thing for like daily use if you cook from bulk foods or whatever. But for a situation like that, yeah, it would be really great to have something like that on hand so you can grab it and you've already got, for instance, salt. Like, who thinks about putting salt in their totes of food? But wouldn't that be so important so you don't have totally bland food if you're, you know, out needing to cook your food away from home? So I love that idea. I'm going to link to that article down below. So we are going to be starting on that next. But this time we are going to go ahead and just sort of basically make more of the mono storage of totes and buckets that have kind of all the same thing in them, because it's easier to deal with right now. So that was just something to throw out there if you're in the planning stages of wanting to maybe incorporate that into your storage, or you even want to start there. Go ahead. I just thought I'd mention that idea because I thought it was great. I didn't hear about that until after I already started doing all this. So let's go ahead and get into the actual process and kind of demystifying some of the logistics of the whole process.
Okay, so it's almost time to open our sealed bag of oxygen absorbers. But before we open that bag, we want to make sure that we've done all of the other processes first, because as soon as you open this bag, as Kathy said, they're going to start to go bad, essentially. They'll start absorbing oxygen from the air. You have a finite amount of time before they are completely used up. So you want to make sure they're in your bags and they're sealed up before these things finish doing their process. So before we do that, we're we're going to make sure everything else is done. Now, unfortunately, that's a lot of math, because you want to make sure that you have the correct size and quantity of oxygen absorbers in your bag. And this is our handy dandy chart, which you can't read, but we're going to link it below so you guys can download it and print it out. So it's good to have a real copy of something just in case your electricity is out, you want to do one of these projects, or if the internet doesn't work or the grid goes down or whatever. You've got your list, and this list tells you for which kind of food, for which size of bag, how many oxygen absorbers you should use. So make sure you guys check that out. So we've got our bags preloaded. We've got the foods in them. We've got all of our stuff written on there. And we've already calculated how many oxygen absorbers we need. And another good thing about calculating ahead of time how many oxygen absorbers you're going to need per bag and how many bags you have, then you know how many of these larger packages you need to open before you open them. So we have, I don't even remember how many is in here because it doesn't say on the bag.
I wrote it on.
Oh, you wrote it on there. There you go. So we have many in there. There's 100 in there. So, oh, it says right up there, 100. I was doing the math for 10,000 cc. Math. Woo. So we have 100 in here, and so we know how many of these bags we have to open ahead of time before we open any of them. So we've got our bags preloaded. We've got them partially sealed with enough space to put an oxygen absorber in there. And we also have, it's also, you want to have a jar ready to go for any extras. As we said before, these are from their last, the last storage project we did. So any that you're not going to use or not be able to use, put in a jar, seal it tight, and throw your pink eyeball in there so you can make sure that these are still good next time you need to use them. Our pink eyeball is still good, so they're good to go. We'll be able to use these today. Another thing you want to think about ahead of time is what you're going to be putting these in. Because once you put the oxygen absorber in there and it does its work, this is going to shrink down and it's going to basically turn into a little brick. Very hard to work with once they are fully complete. So if you're going to be putting them in a round bucket, then you want to put them in the bucket before they're done. So take a little bit of time ahead of time to figure out how many of these are going to fit into the container that you want to put them in, and then once you've sealed these up, put them in that container before they're shrunk down, because it'll look like it's vacuum sealed when you're done, and they'll be very hard to work with. So get all that stuff ready. Make sure that your heating tool is heated up and ready to go, and then you'll be able to begin the process of opening these up and dropping them into your bags.
All right, so Adam is currently working on filling the Mylar bags with our oats in this case. And so we have predetermined each bag will fit nicely 3 pounds, 2 ounces of oats. And we get the weight accurate by weighing it on a digital scale, and so that the bag itself will stand up and not spill over the edge and touch the table, and that would make it have an inaccurate weight. We're weighing inside of a bread pan, and the whole thing is tared with the bread pan weight. So we're aiming for 3.2 or 3 pounds 2 ounces per bag, but we also know that each one of these bags weighs 1 ounce in and of itself. So the scale is actually going to read 3 pounds 3 ounces, but that's just accounting for the weight of the bag. And once this is all set, because we don't have the type of bag that opens at the bottom and stands up nice and straight, we have a tote to hold the bags upright while they're waiting to be sealed. So like here's one right here, which is pretty full of the already filled oats bags, and now it's my job to be partially sealing with just a flat iron is what I use. And so I seal only, you know, leaving an opening big enough to drop in oxygen absorbers. That is so that once it's time to bust open the oxygen absorbers and start putting them in the bags, you have much less time with them sitting in the air, because it actually does take quite a long time to seal all of these bags. And so they end up being in the air for kind of a long time. So in order to just sort of maximize their usefulness, sealing most of the way before you open the oxygen absorbers is just a great way to go. And so basically this is the process that we will go through for everything, for the barley, the beans, the oats, and every single one of these things is going to get to this stage here before we open the oxygen absorbers and begin to drop them in and then do the final, like you press out air and then do the final seal. So basically, instead of having to wrestle with this thing and seal each bag, it'll be drop oxygen absorbers, fold over, press out most of the oxygen, and then basically come along with the flat iron and just clamp, pardon my finger, just clamp it, boom, boom, it'll be sealed, and then move on to the next bag. And so it'll be a fast process at that point. So yes, we have just started on the oats, and we're gonna take it from here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the goal is to try not to get any wrinkles, which you may not, make it, but basically it is just this easy, this is a super old hair iron. I have it set almost to the highest setting, and I'm gonna try to seal only the top ½ inch or so, and that's so that later on we could cut and potentially even get another seal above the Ziploc the second time, like when we want to use this again. Theoretically, when we get into this, in a few years, and then we scratch that off, put a new year, put another 3 pounds 2 ounces, then we can seal it right here and reuse the bag. So now there is a little bit of a hole left, hopefully big enough to stick the oxygen absorbers in, and like I was saying before, you just come along and clamp it. We'll show that, and then it'll be good. Okay, so we've already kind of covered how you deal with a full bulk bag of food. So you have a 25-pound bag, you can divide it evenly into 4 6.25-pound bags, etc. But what if you have kind of a non-specific amount left over in a bulk bag that you would like to go ahead and put up because you're not sure and how long until you're going to get to it? So that's kind of what I've run into here with our polenta. I have a large container in the pantry that already has storage of the polenta, but I didn't know how much was left in here. So basically what Adam is doing now is he's weighing these, and we'll just calculate per gram on the calories so that we'll still be able to know the calorie content, because right here it says 40 grams is 140 calories. And so we'll be able to do the math on that as soon as we get a weight on these 2 bags. It's going into 2 1-gallon bags, what was left. So that's how you do that if you're kind of in that situation. Okay, so we know that each one of these bags is going to get 400 cc's worth of oxygen absorbers. Now, some of them technically we could get away with 300 cc's instead, but that's not something that I am willing to risk. If it says 300 to 400, I'm gonna put 400 just because I don't want there to not be enough. And one thing I want to mention that I did not mention before, a lot of the advice that you see online says that before you can put anything up for long-term storage, you need to freeze everything first for at least a few days. Some people say as long as 2 weeks, in order to kill any bug eggs that may hatch into your food. And that is apparently mostly effective, but not 100% effective. From what I have read, again, in this book, this book, the only 100% effective way of killing bug eggs is for them to be at least 2 weeks in a completely oxygen-free environment. That's another reason that I do not skimp on the oxygen absorbers. I want to make absolutely sure that all the oxygen is gone. And honestly, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that obviously bug eggs would have the ability to like overwinter, or they wouldn't still exist in spring. So it's really the oxygen being removed from the food is what allows you to be sure that nothing's going to hatch in there. So you don't have to freeze anything first, which is such good news, especially if you're already a prepper and your freezers, plural, are already full. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this. You'll see us putting the oxygen absorbers in and then sealing them, stuffing them into buckets, and then we're going to get them over onto the shelving and just to show you that as we go. Miscommunication. This job will test your marriage. No, I'm kidding. It's fine. But Adam was saying that he's starting with the bags farthest away from him to put the oxygen absorbers in, and I thought he just meant here back, but he meant this column right here. So I have sealed a whole bunch of bags that don't have oxygen absorbers in them. So take two. Now we'll be very happy that I only seal a little bit at the top, because you can cut it off and reseal. Oh my gosh. It was only 3 bags, so it's not quite so bad. So we're gonna continue sealing, and yeah. Okay, so all of that became 9 pretty stuffed full buckets. There was 1 extra bag of barley, which we put into one of these totes because we did have to recently get in and grab a popcorn out. So the barley went in the space where the popcorn was. So I'm going to go ahead and keep track of that. So I don't know if you noticed the totes are all numbered. So we're going to be basically doing a similar number system here. So it's really important not only to track what you have, but where it is. And so that's part of our tracking system. I just use a spreadsheet in Google Docs, and it tells me where everything is. So yeah, I knew where the hole was to stick the barley, but these guys are going to take a few hours now to finish fully absorbing all the oxygen. And then sort of a couple of these are a little higher, and so we're hoping that they'll fit. We're just going to come back periodically and kind of push a little bit to try to like force the oxygen to hopefully absorb out of it and like flatten it down into, you know, a bucket that will hold everything. But yeah, that is good. It took longer than we expected, but this does take a long time. I feel like it's really important to let everybody know this takes a really long time. So definitely expect that going in. But yeah, so that's it for the Mylar storage. Hopefully this is helpful. This is all going to go into this shelf right here, like 1 little extra bucket. But yeah, it ended up being, I don't know how much food, quite a lot of food going to go into that space. And so yes, we do really love these little square buckets. If you can find, you know, if you happen to be friends with a chef like we are, or if you know, can find a restaurant or a resort or some place that gets you know, buckets like Adam was saying, this is buckets of mayonnaise, which is obviously, this is not a vegan food, but you know, I'll take the bucket. And yeah, be able to get all that. So we were able to get all this for free, these buckets. So super, super helpful. We've also purchased buckets that were expensive. So we've done both. But yeah, square is really awesome because look how much, you know, how little space is wasted compared to the round. But okay, that's seriously going to be it from me. And as always, we hope the rest of your day is good and your life stays wonderful. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions or comments, please let us know down below in the comments.
That's where comments go.
Really? Yeah. It's awesome how they're like called the thing that they are. Okay, seriously, we're going down. All right. See you guys later. Bye.